From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. A gathering of state lawmakers last month at a resort in Vail is raising questions about ethics and the influence of dark money in Colorado politics. Colorado's Independent Ethics Commission plans to investigate whether 16 Democratic lawmakers violated a state ban on accepting gifts. The complaints stem from that Vail retreat, which was funded in part by a group which doesn't publicly disclose its donors. The investigation has sparked a flurry of denials and infighting among state Democrats. And it raises questions about whether lawmakers intentionally sidestep the rules or if the rules themselves are unclear. Politics reporter Taylor Dalvin is following this for the Colorado Sun. She joined me to talk about what we know about the 16 lawmakers in question and what they discussed with lobbyists in Vail.
So the senator who leads the Opportunity Caucus, Senator Lindsay Doherty, told us that the event in Vail was mainly educational. There were panels on certain topics, and it was really an opportunity for these Democratic lawmakers to come together and kind of set their priorities for the caucus. They are really focused on affordability and really centering Colorado's middle class. And so she said that the event was largely educational and sort of strategizing on how they were going to implement policy.
Okay, so Taylor, this was in a very nice hotel. Give us a sense of how fancy this place was.
So this is the Sonnenelp Hotel in Vail, which has been there for a long time. It's considered, I think, a luxury hotel. In October, the rooms are not as expensive as they are, say, in January through March in peak ski season. I think I looked at the time to book a hotel for the next weekend, and it was around like $350. So not as crazy as some other places in Vail might be, but still, a nice, really nice hotel.
Well, let's talk about the complaint. Now, a group that's called One Main Street Colorado paid $25,000 to cover the cost of a block of hotel rooms for the lawmakers. What do we know about this group?
So One Main Street Colorado is a nonprofit 501c4 organization, which means that they can be involved in politics. And they don't disclose their donors. They're what we consider a dark money group. And they're known for backing moderate Democrats in primaries against more progressive candidates. And they actually helped this group of Democrats, the Opportunity Caucus, form in January. And the Opportunity Caucus is also a 501c4 nonprofit organization that doesn't disclose its donors and that we also consider a dark money group. So we know that One Main Street Colorado helped the caucus get going and then did vote to provide these funds for covering the room block for this Vail event.
Now, a progressive group itself, called Colorado Common Cause, filed this ethics complaint. What exactly does it accuse lawmakers of doing?
So Common Cause filed ethics complaints against 16 Democrats who went to this Vail retreat, and it accuses them of violating Colorado's gift ban. So the Colorado Constitution says that elected officials are not allowed to take gifts from lobbyists, corporations, but it does provide some exceptions. And one of them is for events where elected officials are scheduled speakers. It says that a nonprofit group can cover reasonable expenses for events like that, as long as that nonprofit receives only 5% of its funding from for-profit corporations. And so the complaints against these lawmakers allege that because the Opportunity Caucus and One Main Street Colorado are dark money groups, there was no way for the lawmakers to know that they met this 5% rule.
This seems a little bit murky. Taylor, how aware were the lawmakers that attending this retreat could potentially violate the state's ban on accepting gifts?
Well, we've talked to the chair of the Opportunity Caucus, Senator Doherty, and she insists that they violated no rules. They had a lawyer there advising them, making sure that this event complied with all relevant Colorado regulations. So, she's really confident that this was all in line. This amendment to the Constitution was passed by voters in Colorado in 2006, and lawmakers are very aware of its existence.
Now, you wrote in your article that members of the Opportunity Caucus have responded to the complaints by making a $25,000 donation to Food Bank of the Rockies. Is that sort of an admission of guilt?
So it's not an admission of guilt. Definitely not. So the Opportunity Caucus decided to make this donation in the same amount that they received from the One Main Street group before the event.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unclear exactly how this idea originated, but something that Common Cause, the group that filed the complaints, really wanted is for the Opportunity Caucus to get rid of the money they received from One Main Street, Colorado. And so this idea originated as part of settlement talks. Both sides, the Opportunity Caucus and Common Cause, are in negotiations to settle this outside of the Ethics Commission. And so this was an idea of kind of a good faith effort to do that.
Now, the lawmakers in this case are facing fines and penalties. Taylor, you have reported on government and politics for years. How common is an ethics case like this at the state level?
So very few complaints at the Independent Ethics Commission make it past this phase. So it's more common for the commissioners to decide that a complaint is frivolous. In this case, the commissioners decided that these complaints against these Opportunity Caucus lawmakers were non-frivolous, and so they therefore then will investigate. I think it's also important to know that the commission moves incredibly slowly. It could be, more than a year or years before we get any kind of resolution on this and determination. So
wow.
I think, both sides, it seems, are eager to find a resolution before then and settle this.
What does this ethics case say about the way politics are funded?
I think it's a good reminder that in many cases we don't know how politics are funded. We've asked the Opportunity Caucus and One Main Street to disclose their donors, and that's something they've had an opportunity to do since we started asking about this event last month, and both of those groups have declined to do that.
Taylor, these days we hear about much larger incidents of money possibly influencing politics, like whether the nation of Qatar can give President Trump a jetliner, for example. Why should people care about some state lawmakers in a fancy hotel?
We should always be interested in who's supporting our lawmakers, where their interests really lie. I think it would be so easy for these groups to say who paid for this, and they so far haven't. And so, I think the public really deserves to know how this stuff works and who funds events like this.
Taylor Dalvin writes about government and politics for the Colorado Sun. We'll include a link to her story in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.